it's like rather than us looking to position one or two women in different places and say that it's for all of us, why don't we just dismantle the patriarchy?
An inclusive space benefits
All of us.
Women build economies. Let's not forget the case of India. They were pulled out from poverty capital of the world by the informal economy run by women. We build economies, and that's why bringing more women in is simply smart economy.
But I was like, okay, so not just political, it has to be strong. But I'm
Maybe there's
something
weak.
else. Intentional political will is very important.
Welcome to the Inclusive Governance Podcast, brought to you by the Nigerian Women Trust Fund, with support from Open Societies Foundation and produced by Skill Hub Consulting, the producers of the Change Makers Circle podcast series. I'm your host, Esther Hadiza Ijiaku, and this is a space where we explore how inclusive governance can impact the participation and the impact on the lives of women, especially women in Nigeria. In today's conversation, we will be exploring understanding the ruling and debating feminism, neoliberal movement, or revolutionary struggle. To unpack this mouthful, I have some very inspiring guests with me in the studio today. And first of all, we have Angoli Anyebo. Angoli is the director of Air Women's Hub and a development professional with almost a decade of field experience in humanitarian work, gender equality, and social inclusion. She has worked across sectors, leading impactful gender-focused programs, advocating for women leadership, and driving grassroots and policy-level change. With her background in psychology, HR, and gender studies, and a career that spans both Nigeria and international organizations, she has been a powerful voice on economic justice, peace building, and women's political participation. She's a recipient of so many awards. And I am stoked. I'm excited because Angoli is joining us in the studio to unpack these many concepts that are in our topic. Welcome, Angoli. Good to have you in the studio.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us. And of course, joining her is Brenda Anugom. She's the CEO, that's the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Women Trust Fund. Brenda is a lawyer and gender equality advocate with over 20 years of experience working on justice, governance, and women's rights. She held influential roles with Doctors Without Borders. I will not say the French name, Policy Vote Africa, and Nigerian Governors Forum, where she helped align procurement laws across all states. She holds an LLM in Rule of Law for Development and is widely recognized for her leadership in pushing forward women's political participation in Nigeria. Welcome, Brenda, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited because Brenda is the CEO of Nigerian Women Trust Fund that is bringing you this podcast. So it means that we have the brain behind the ideas that we're bringing forward in the different episodes. So now that we have the heavy introduction out of the way, and I've introduced my beautiful guests, I want to get a few things out of the way. And we started discussing, even before we sat down in the studio, about the elephant in the room, the words that you just mentioned, and people, hackles are raised, and people are wondering what's going on. Feminism. So in the Nigerian context, and I want to hear from both of you, from your perspectives. In the Nigerian context, how do you define feminism and what does it mean to you personally and politically? Maybe I'll start with Angoli.
Thank you so much. You're very right. Those words, right? Those words can trigger somebody or it can re-educate somebody. What feminism means to me is it means inclusion. It means considering every single human being from an intersectional lens. It means not closing the door at anybody. It means whatever it is you're developing, projects, interventions, policies, solution, you are considering every single person. So feminism is not the kind of word that has been translated in our beautiful country, Nigeria. When feminism now flew into Nigeria, unfortunately, it had been having some sort of vibrations that are not accurate. Feminism in Nigeria seems to connote something negative, and it shouldn't be. Feminism in Nigeria seems to look at just one gender, which is for women, and it shouldn't be. We have so many great men and so many great boys who think in feminist lens. You empower your wife, you empower your daughter, you empower the girl child, you ensure that you're fighting for the rights of women in offices. That is feminism. So feminism
Usually people don't think about that. They just think of the woman that they don't know on TV, or the woman they don't know on the street, or not really remembering that there are females in their houses that they're doing things for and think that they should have the best life possible.
Yes, and that is why we need to keep talking and speaking to this so that we can get our society to reimagine what feminism. Feminism is not a bad thing at all. It's not a bad word.
Brenda,
I agree. I mean, I concur with both of you. It's not a bad word at all. And yes, once certain words are mentioned, feminism is one, gender is another. People start, getting up in arms. Some get so defensive. But I mean, these words shouldn't actually trigger such responses. And that's because feminism simply means just your belief or your take in life that every person, every human being matters and deserves opportunities. Absolutely. And that is why, as parents, we take our kids to school. We don't look at, oh, you're a boy or you're a girl. You take your girl child to school, you take your boy child to school. You ensure that they get the best education because you want them to get jobs in the future or be innovators, create their own jobs, be useful to the society. This morning, I was just watching TV and I saw, graduates of at the NDA, and we saw proud dads and moms there cheering for their kids. If your daughter graduated, you're cheering for her. You're a feminist because you have already, watched her, groomed her since she got there. And some of them even came to help decorate their kids. Those are things that give you joy. So feminism is not a bad word.
On a personal note,
it's not a bad word at all.
That gives me a lot of pride because I went to military school. I went to Air Force Girls Military School, and we did the whole 9 in terms of military training and all of that. And one big issue we had was the fact that we couldn't go to NDA, couldn't go to Nigerian Defense Academy. It's in the 90s that girls now had the opportunity to go as regular officers in the Nigeria Defense Academy. So it's brilliant that you noticed, and I mean, you picked on it.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, which means we got to a situation where we said, oh my goodness, our women also need this kind of training. That's feminism. You're giving them opportunity to become whatever they want. We have women Air Force pilots. We have women who serve in the army.
Navy officers.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's just the equal opportunity that cuts across.
Awesome. So, but some argue, Brenda, that contemporary feminism has been co-opted into a neoliberal framework focused on individual empowerment rather than the collective transformation. Do you agree?
First of all, I don't believe that there's something called neoliberal feminism, contemporary feminism.
I look forward to surviving this episode.
Feminism. I'm serious. I don't believe in it because the push or the movement for equal opportunity didn't start today. So I wouldn't call it neoliberal. And it's not like contemporary, something that had jumped down from the moon. It has always been there. And let's even look at Nigerian context. Let's even look at the political circle. We've had the greats like Fumilayo Ransome Kuti. We've had Margaret Ekpo, Flora Wampa, who wrote. These people have been there, speaking for the women. Not just for women because, men should not be spoken for, but to also identify that these are part of the society. And when we all work together, as a collective, the country develops better and faster. So I don't believe in neoliberal or contemporary. Feminism is feminism. It cuts across. It's been there from beginning of time. And right now we do have maybe a higher push because people are more aware of the gains of involving everyone, inclusion. So maybe that's why people say neoliberal, but I just think it's the level of awareness. We have more awareness right now, and we have more people pushing for inclusivity. So perhaps that's why people label it neoliberal, in my view.
Maybe a bit closer, looking at it a bit closer, neoliberal being focused on the individual. What I'm taking from it is that you're looking at the supply side. So whether the women are ready, whether they're empowered, whether they have choice, and all of that, versus the systemic change.
Well,
I don't know.
If I can come in. So neoliberal feminism, you're right. It started a long time ago from liberal feminism. So liberal feminism was started by middle-class white women who didn't think that they had a stake in the pie, right? Mm-hmm. From, professional point of view. And the liberal feminists were countered against by the radical, because you're saying that liberal is for white people. You're not looking at what black women are. And then from the radical feminism, it now morphed into women in development, and now morphed into women and development, and now morphed into women in environment, so ecofeminism. So it all came, but I think the point about the question for me is neoliberal feminism is individualistic.
Yes.
So it's like one woman in different organizations, pockets of women identified, and when these women are identified and they make it, is from a self-improvement point of view. So we've got pockets of women that we mention in our country. Me
even
personally,
in politics or whatever.
We mention them, and I usually ask, why is there just one of this person, one of this person, one of this person? So that's neoliberalism. Now, for the revolutionary, which is sort of cut away a little bit from radical, it's like rather than us looking to position one or two women in different places and say that it's for all of us, why don't we just dismantle the patriarchy? Why don't we dismantle those root causes, those social norms that made all of us have this issue in the first place? Mm-hmm. Why don't we just radicalize it and just unpack it? So the collective of the convention is that the collective should be greater than the personal notion. The collective of women like us pushing like the 35% affirmative action is for every single woman, every single girl, every single person in Nigeria. Neoliberalism is taking one woman and putting her in a position and say that we've all won.
That's woman leader.
So yeah,
it's a good example.
Yes. So
woman leader. We have men who are chairmen of women's committees and
so revolutionary is saying that let us rejig this foundation of patriarchy. Patriarchy affects men and women.
Yes,
right?
Actually, yes.
And just like she said earlier, gender is man and woman. So let's shift this base. Let's take all of these issues away and let every single woman come on board. Let's make a case for every single woman as opposed to neoliberals. And I can tell you a lot of women who are neoliberals in our country. Yeah. But I don't think we're here to mention names.
We're not here to mention names. I mean, they have advantage. They have certain advantages, and that's how come they got to where they are. They're actually the exception, rather than the rule. Generally, we should have as many of them as possible. Inclusive Governance Podcast is brought to you by Nigerian Women Trust Fund with support from Open Society Foundations and produced by Skill Hub Consulting. You jumped straight into what I was going to ask, Angeli. So I'm going to go back to Brenda to ask, how do we ensure that advocacy for inclusion translates into structural change rather than symbolic representation?
So thanks, Brenda. Thanks a lot. And, what Angeli talked about, looking at one woman and just empowering her and, the focus on her. But I see it beyond that. If you empower one person in this circle, another circle empowers another, circle empowers another. in the long run, in the collective, there are women that are being empowered. So that's why I don't believe in that neoliberal, like if in this circle you have this one person, okay, another circle there will be another one person, another circle there will be another one person. Yes, we may not be at the same pace as the men, but at least we are moving. There is some sort of progress. And in terms of structure now, looking at the whole thing, I just trying to look at the concept I read about someone, a researcher wrote about the evolution, revolution, and the neverlution. Okay. So in terms of the revolution, it's, the push, the activism, let's have more women, let's have inclusive spaces.
That's structural change.
Yeah, so that's the revolution.
Yes.
The evolution is, the activism is making an impact, and the norms are shifting. So there's cultural change, we're changing the trajectory and the rest of it. So which means the activism is working. Then the neverlution is now when there's a pushback. Certain people feeling, we're about to be replaced. The fear of being replaced is one of the worst any human being can have. Mm-hmm. And you see, they start to push back. So that's where I think, and I believe that the words feminism and gender became that, attacking field, because they feel these are some of the things that you've put in, or these people have put in order to get us replaced. So that's the lens I'm going to look at.
Would you like to add anything? Basically, I was trying to find out more about how advocacy for inclusion can translate to structural change rather than being more cosmetic or symbolic.
Yes, I think it's a very apt question, because as you were saying earlier, we're still going to keep on advocating. And activism is a feminist language, is a tool. For me, there's some critical things. There's something I read somewhere that says strong political will. I think I was reviewing how Uganda and Rwanda got a lot more women in positions of parliament. And they said strong political will. Mm-hmm. I know that in our country, on our space, you like that word, political will. If there's political will. But so somebody now says strong. I was like, okay, so not just political, it has to be strong.
It has to be strong.
But I've added something else. Intentional political will is very important. And then when I was meditating through, I thought, you know what? We need to lobby. Lobbying is another terminology that is seen very negative. But some people are paid to lobby and make sure that the policies that we're having is seeping through. We have to speak to people, re-educate people, and put more work into it. Now, unfortunately, there's also a research that shows that when we do all of this activism, and we have women in positions of leadership, it doesn't necessarily translate to policies that are effective for the community, right? So what do we do about that is what you're asking. So those campaigns have to be intentional, has to be targeted. And we have to ensure that we also advocate that there are committees that are in the National Assembly or in state assemblies that women should occupy, and it should be mainstream to ensure it is actually answering and resolving the issues surrounding what we want. Mm-hmm. Because that is what I saw in the research that was lacking. Even in Rwanda, Uganda, and South Africa, in their feedback regarding how they've done all of this affirmative action, I read that they still have that issue because direct voting of women is still limited. Yes, you have representation is there, but actual policy, you've got to campaign, you got to be it's not just strong political will, it's got to be intentionally strong
as well, and have all the resources that you need.
Have to. And then lastly, I'll have to end by saying, I now realize that we need to have our own M&E agency. Nigeria needs a monitoring
for Nigeria, or just for women issues?
No, for like the policies that we have, 35% affirmative action, say if it's passed, or reserve seat bill is passed, for example, which of the agencies is monitoring it? Because what we realize that when you mainstream all these agencies that we say we're going to go and advocate and meet stakeholders and talk to them, who is ensuring that these policies are actionable? We need somebody to do that. Now you're not talking about cost of governance, but I advocate that we have an M&E agency.
No, I mean,
but sorry, but let me just put,
Okay,
if it is passed, it becomes a legislation.
Yes.
So legislation has force of law, so it's stronger than a mere policy. So in that way, whether we have an M&E agency or not, it is the law, so you have to comply. So if the people don't comply, then you go to court. It happened in Senegal. They had the gender parity law, and they insisted that under the law, the political parties have to field a certain number of women. When certain political parties didn't, others went to court, and those political parties were disqualified from contesting. So when there are penalties, and like you just said, once the 35% affirmative action, if it becomes law, or the reserved seats bill becomes law, then it's in our constitution, it's entrenched in our constitution, and there is no way somebody can get up and blatantly avoid what is in the constitution, and nobody calls them out.
But there's a way. In Nigeria, there is a way.
Then we go to court. That's why we have the courts. So you go to the court. You go to the court to enforce.
There's a way, because
like it happened in Senegal.
Even in these African countries, right? You're very correct. But guess what? They also did intentionally. The judiciary was intentional. Their judiciary, if you check these countries, they have a very vibrant, strong judiciary system who you can take anybody to court and it will work. So going back to your previous questions about making sure that this works, the judiciary has to be intentional. And that's something that I found, so thank you for mentioning that, in all of these other countries that was supporting all of the legislation, as you put it, or even if the agencies who come under the legislation as well, who want to make it work, they would not want to be disciplined.
I think what I'm getting from what you're saying is that this, it's not enough to even have the right, to have the law. It has to be implemented, and there has to be the will to make it work, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, which brings me to a quick question about the ruling.
Yeah.
The ruling is about even a policy, right?
Sorry, which ruling is
the
that?
Ruling on 35%.
The 35% affirmative action is still within a policy.
Yes.
So as a policy document, it's not justiciable.
Yes, that's my point.
Yeah.
So as a policy document, you can't even you can't have the M&E, you can't enforce it. Pretty much, it's more like a recommendation, and having a framework that would guide you if you are willing. We're back to the willingness. So what do you think, Brenda, do you view this ruling itself as you don't like the neoliberal reform? So I would say, is it a revolutionary step towards dismantling patriarchy in governance? Because this is still at policy stage. The excitement, I remember when the ruling was passed, there were pictures, the media coverage, blah, blah, blah. And then now we're here. So have we made that impact that we thought we were going to make in terms of shifting norms and patriarchy and all of that?
Hating to be a Debbie Downer in this case. 2022, when we received the judgment, everybody was like,
we were very happy.
We are, we've made a headline, this is a groundbreaking judgment, which actually it is. But, nobody acted on it. Nobody acted on it. So that is why we need to move a step further with this reserved seats bill, and then have, the Constitution amended or altered on sections 48, 49, and 91, so that we'll have seats that are just reserved for women. And I don't want people to look at them as tokens.
And it's just for 4 cycles, actually.
Well,
just
four cycles, then we review.
Yes.
I don't think it's 4 cycles, then we quit.
Okay.
We review to see, well, has this encouraged more women? Because that's the final target. Let's encourage more women to run. Let's have more women already empowered. In that way, we have more mentors for, younger girls who may want to, be in politics. Because right now, if you talk to any child, I remember during the March 8th Women's Day, we went to a school and we asked children to draw their parents. A child drew a mom, a woman with a turban on her hair and a spoon in her hand. drew the dad, somebody with broad shoulders, suits, and then next to him is a car, which means dad is going to work, mom is cooking the kids. So in our minds, we've been socialized to see leaders to have the shape of a man, which is not a bad thing. But there's nothing wrong with seeing a leader as both male and female. So when we have more women representing us in the state houses of assembly, at the National Assembly, then younger people, children can start seeing leaders shaped like women. So it's not just only to have them there, it's also to have like some sort of a ripple effect, and so that in the future, more people will be encouraged to run for office, and then you can have more women voting for women. Today on the news, somebody mentioned the case of Sarah Jibrin, who went somewhere and there were women jumping, all tying wrapper with uniform, and then she had one vote. And she remembered she voted for herself.
Yes.
So that vote was hers. So all those that had the wrapper and the uniform, none of them voted for her. So in this case, we will have now more women voting for women. So it's going to have a lot of ripple effects if this 35%, if this reserved seats bill is passed into.
I mean, it even just paints a picture of what is possible. That some people think, they try based on what they see. You have a role model. You have somebody there that shows you that, oh, this is possible. If I try, I can actually get into the National Assembly. But Angeli, I want to come to to affirmative action. Let's just talk about affirmative action in this context. Why does it matter? Why it matters for women's political participation or inclusion and governance? Why do we need affirmative action in the first place? Why do we need it for women's inclusion and governance?
Okay. Thank you for that question. Affirmative action for me, is an inclusive word, even if it sounds quite harsh. Affirm. Like gender and feminism.
Yes.
I don't know why they use affirmative, but I get the gist, but when you're talking about language and terminology and conceptualization. So affirmative action for me is important because women have been historically disadvantaged, economically disadvantaged. It didn't happen pre-colonially. Let's get that fact right. Okay, because, I'm Igbo and we're not economically disadvantaged, right? A lot of women from Hausa, from Yoruba, you mentioned, from Lara, some a lot of powerful women. Colonization came, and we had to be seen in a Victorian era. So in the bed of colonization, the Western people told us that for us to be colonized, we had to leave some of our behaviors aside. And the women were likened to behave like the Victorian women, like their wives, who were doing nothing but keeping house.
Yes.
And we African women,
in distress.
yes. Yeah. So that's where all of that, and I really always preach about history, because when you learn history, you really learn who you are as a woman in Africa. You center yourself very, very well. So affirmative action is now coming to say, listen, we are playing catch up now, right? All of these laws that have come into place colonially has disadvantaged us. Now we have to play catch up. What is the best tool or process for us to use to play catch up? That's how I've tried to simplify it. So affirmative action. Let's ensure that we have a percentage of women in specific spaces. Let us make sure that it is possible so that these women can then come into positions of leadership. And then we can begin to mainstream it around, and then policies, legislation can begin to transform society.
The frameworks we need.
We need affirmative action. Yeah. And we've thrown around different percentages. Some have started arguing about 50%. If we keep on taking it back to Nigerian context, which we always have to speak from, 35% affirmative action, they're still jittery about it. Like you said, I love the word you use, up in arms. It's such an amazing word.
Yes.
And you want to say 50, hello, right? However, what I look at it is that, opportunity to facilitate a session, TIGN session with Women Fund a couple of months ago. And while we're doing our breakout sessions, and I was listening and studying and meditating on what every fantastic participant was saying, I realized that in that particular moment, I was saying to them that, how about while we're looking for 35% affirmative action in the different correct sectors, how about you, as a representative here, take this information back to your local community.
Okay, so you landed on me asking Brenda a question around what are the biggest challenges to compliance by political actors and institutions. Okay. Because now you just said, what's wrong with you taking... For the reason why they're not going that far is that there must be some challenges. Absolutely. Or there are some barriers.
Absolutely.
What do you think about?
We can't divorce that from social cultural, and I will leave this social cultural. People will bring religion, but I would say religion is now part of our culture, because culture is the way you live. Mm-hmm. And every day, if you wake up in the morning, you pray, or you pray a certain time, it becomes your culture. It's your way of life. Mm-hmm. So social cultural. And, you also hit it on the head when we had, these people invade, Africa, changed all our culture and took us to, like you said, damsel in distress situation, and women had to be in the background. And politically, women have been in the background. We only have had a few that have tried to stand toe to toe, and still we have that issue. So socially, we have been socialized to see men as, leaders and women as damsel in distress, sitting in the kitchen, cooking. But then we have seen women win accolades for this country, not by cooking. Forget about Hilda Baci. Let's look at talking about the contemporary. Toby Amusan brought glory to this country by running. Sports. She wasn't cooking. And back to back, two whole weeks, women brought accolades back and took, great rewards. The basketballers, the footballers, only for the men to go and lose their matches the next week.
Brenda, let them listen to our podcast.
So we have shown resilience. We've shown that we hit the target, and then we keep our eyes on the prize. So if women can bring accolades to this country, bring us good names, what is wrong with including us in the leadership space?
So what examples, because, now, if we are looking at about 4% in the National Assembly, for example, in politics, that doesn't tell us, it doesn't give us a lot to work with. So are there quick examples of countries where the affirmative action worked? And what can we learn? That's the key thing. What can we learn from them? I know you've mentioned Senegal, you've mentioned
South Africa, Rwanda.
So what can we learn from them?
Yeah, like even if you look from the European countries, for example, Iceland, Norway, Sweden,
Scandinavians.
The Scandinavian.
Their prime ministers have been women. Mm-hmm. New Zealand, when we had COVID, the prime minister was that was a country that, I don't have to talk too much, but you see what I mean. Yeah. What can we learn from it? It's obvious. It's glaring obvious, right? Women in positions of leadership, women in political inclusion, we would support the men and make sure that the country is safer. That's what it is. You just need to tap into the resource.
And then we prioritize right.
Yes, it just helps for all of us to work well. It really does. It benefits men, it benefits women. In African country, Brenda has mentioned, a few Rwanda, Senegal, South Africa, even Namibia.
Oh yeah,
who's president?
They have the first three.
UN.
Yes, but she's the president, and I call her Excellency NNN because I honestly cannot pronounce all her N. I'm practicing because a lot of people pronouncing my name properly. So Her Excellency NNN is the first president of Namibia. Look at that. Why do you think she was able to get into that position? Because structures shifted, narratives shifted, right? Patriarchy was just streamlined and affirmative action was put in place. And then I have to close by saying that, you see, this affirmative action, we need to take it to the local councils. Mm-hmm. Because I honestly get tired of the elitist conversation that we normally have and speak to and see women in those positions, which is great, like you said, right? But imagine starting from the bottom, grassroots, let's not call it bottom, starting from the grassroots and start repositioning women in there and start giving them consulorship, local government chairman, putting all of them there. From that angle, from that lens, you're seeing more women in positions of leadership. And it starts becoming a norm. It may not be an entire norm, but it will shift a little bit. People now start getting used to, whether we like it or not, the media is an issue. What you see on TV is what we're all assimilating. You shift the norm, And from the consular base, from that local government, local councillors, schools, even in churches, make women the pastors. Let women be full pastors instead of only the man being the pastor, right?
But there are women pastors.
Yeah, there are who are pastor misses. Yeah, so you don't exist alone in a whole. I've done the research. Trust me. In this whole entire country, Nigeria, you always have to have a man as the pastor. How many churches have women pastors? They're not up to 3. Even in this Abuja, there's only 1. I know. There's a full pastor. The leading pastor of a whole entire church is one woman. And you see when they're doing programs in Abuja that I've seen in Lagos, you see lineup of men as pastors. If they put any woman there, she's only coming to sing. Come on. Make it make sense, like my Gen Z friend just said.
I get your point. And I think something that I really took away from what you said is that there needs to be a pipeline. So you have a pipeline of leadership from the community level coming up. It doesn't have to be somebody already at the top, the elite, that gets there because of the advantages that they have. But everybody deserves a chance.
Opportunity.
So I will come to the final question, which is, what would you say to young Nigerian women and activists about their role in shaping the future of inclusive governance in Nigeria? I'll take it from both of them.
Absolutely. And I'm going to pick from what she just said, coming from the grassroots, coming from the homes. All politics is local, and everything we do, whether we like it or not, is tied to politics in one way or the other, even the family. But let's also remember that there are some cultural structures. And I'll give you an example. We had meetings with people who are called the Red Cap Chiefs. And when we asked, why is it that there are no women here? They said, we do have the female version of this. They are empowered women, they speak, they bring matters to the fore, and the matters can be discussed. But this is exclusively our preserve. And I respect that, because we've seen that when you try to force things on what used to be, it usually backfires and backfires negatively. So if we maintain those structures, so if you want to be an activist,
have good culture. And
absolutely. So to be an activist, recognize those cultures, respect the structures, but still pass the message across. And the message being, an inclusive space benefits all of us. Women build economies. Let's not forget the case of India. They were pulled out from poverty capital of the world by the informal economy run by women. We build economies, and anybody who wants to develop needs the other person. You can't have only people who think in one direction. And that's why bringing more women in is simply smart economics. So think as an activist, respect structures, respect culture, but then keep speaking to having all of us in the room, because all of us in the room, with all of us in the room, all of us will succeed.
Thank you.
I think for me, include more young women in the conversation. Intentionally include more young women in the conversation, because like I always say, whether we like it or not, the baton will be passed down. You can't be there forever. But make sure that we're mentoring and sponsoring young women who will take over. Not just that, not just lip service. Actively putting them in those spaces to test their capacity, to test their competence, and to build on it. Because that's how you can get them rising. This reserve seats bill is very important, in my opinion, that young women are mainstreamed, and then you envision them in the reserve seats bill. Like my story right now, my narrative right now is maybe in the next 4 years, or in the second cycle, the next 8 years. If you start working on it now and start envisioning yourself, you might be running for office in the next 8 years or in the fourth sector. So I strongly believe, because they make up 58% of the youth population, young women, you're not going to do away with them.
Yeah.
But I agree with you in terms of the social norms that still stifles us. So it's a way to intelligently reshift that, achieve your social expectations, but know that you can always have everything, maybe not at the same time, but at different times.
Incrementally, still works.
Wow. It feels like the time just flew by. I want to say thank you to you, Brenda and Angoli, for such a rich and inspiring discussion. You helped us better understand so many terms and concepts, I think. Feminism, neoliberal feminism, gender, and then also more insight into the ruling for affirmative action and the impact it can have on women, not just women, even on society in general, because we need to look at it like from the big picture. I want to thank you, our listeners, our viewers, for tuning in. The Inclusive Governance Podcast is brought to you by the Nigerian Women Trust Fund with support from the Open Society Foundation and produced by Skill Hub Consulting. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, share, and join us again next week for another engaging discussion with other amazing, amazing guests. I'm your host, Esther Hadiza Ijaku. Until next time, stay engaged, stay informed, and keep building the future we want. Thank you.